one of the industry's most dashing leading men, Tyrone Power. The 44-year-old actor suddenly collapsed and died from a heart attack.
It is well known that Tyrone Power caused quite a stir during his early years in the film industry. His attractiveness, charisma, and acting chops were too much for his admirers to resist. He was a driven and ambitious performer who, alas, gave it his best every time. Power, at the age of 44, passed away on set after disregarding vital medical warnings regarding a potentially fatal condition. Helen Emma Paya Power and Tyrone Power Sr., an American stage and film actor of English descent, had a son, Tyrone, in Cincinnati, Ohio, in 1914. Ann Power was born in 1915, his sister. Power was born into a theatrical family and became known as theater royalty after moving to California. His parents were also actresses. His Gigi grandpa was a comedian and performer from Ireland who was prominent in the theater industry from 1797 until 1841. His paternal great-grandmother was Anne Gilbert, and his paternal grandmother was Ethel Lavaux, both of whom were connected to actors Laurence Olivier and Evelyn Waugh, respectively. Through his father's first cousin, Nora Emily Gorman Power, the gifted actor was also connected to the renowned theatrical director Sir Tyrone Guthrie. Guthrie was the inaugural director of the Stratford Festival in Canada and the Guthrie Theatre in Minneapolis, Minnesota. There were a lot of famous performers in his family tree. Since Tyrone's father was an actor with a hectic schedule, he was rarely home, and things quickly became unbalanced for Tyrone. Nonetheless, Tyrone devoted a great deal of time to his mother, whose strong convictions and fervent Roman Catholic faith had a profound impact on him. All through his life and work, his beliefs and ideals would be influenced by this faith. Power and his sister were raised in Cincinnati by their mother after their parents' 1920 divorce granted her custody of the children. Power was 6 years old at the time. It was a difficult time, but it also deepened their relationship. He had unwavering moral support and direction from his mother, who always pushed her children to follow their dreams. Attending Catholic schooling, Power graduated from Purcell High School in 1931 with a small desire that gradually blossomed. His budding desire kept him from following in his father's footsteps and going to college. He uprooted his life and headed west to study acting with his legendary father, who was a legendary figure in the theater. Tyrone Power Sr. had already established himself as a great theatrical and silent cinema actor. He had recently finished filming his first talkie, The Big Trail, 1930, in which he co-starred with John Wayne, a promising rookie. Tragically, Power Sr. was supposed to feature in The Miracle Man, a film adaptation of a Lon Chaney classic. He died of a heart attack in December 1931 while filming the part, and his little son was at his side. The young actor's heart broke at the news of his loss, but he remained determined to carry on his family's acting legacy. Power persisted in his acting career despite the fact that many of his contacts, those who had known his father well, rejected his parts. Despite the lack of direct progression, a little part in the 1932 picture Tom Brown of Culver offered a ray of optimism. Even after his interest dwindled, he continued to participate in community theater and serve as an extra in Flirtation Walk. He went to New York on the recommendation of a friend in search of further experience, and he was in several Broadway shows there, including St. Joan, Flowers of the Forest, Romeo and Juliet, and more. Henry King, a filmmaker, finally met Tyrone, and his charm and excellent looks were enough to make an impression. King suggested that Power play the lead role in Fox's 1936 staging of Lloyd's of London because he saw him as an obvious Hollywood talent. Power finally got his big break, the chance to begin his career. But there was a hitch. Don Amici was supposed to play the lead part originally. Casting Power did not excite everyone. Although he had doubts, Fox studio boss Darryl Zanuck had a preference for Amici, whom he thought the studio needed. Thankfully, King and Barbara M. Lon, Fox's film editor, persuaded Zanuck that Power had a more intimidating demeanor, and he grudgingly decided to give him a go. Power and Zanuck would go on to work together on 11 more films, but Zanuck had no idea. After the film, Power's charisma and acting chops were in high demand. Despite his relative obscurity when he first joined the industry, he went on to become one of the most famous actors of the golden age of Hollywood. The box office success of any picture he headlined was guaranteed by his charisma and adaptability. Power was a versatile actor who appeared in films across several genres. While he was most known for his romantic comedies, Power also starred in action films like Thin Ice and Daytime Wife. Actor and fencer Basil Rathbone once said of Power, "Tyrone could have fended off Errol Flynn with ease due to his exceptional swordsmanship. A Yank in the RAF, The Mark of Zorro, and This Above All are among Power's combat films. The Black Swan is one of his adventure films. Son of Fury, the story of Benjamin Blake, Old Chicago, Blood and Sand, The Rains Came, and Suez are among his notable drama appearances. His filmography also featured musicals such as Second Fiddle, Rose of Washington Square, and Alexander's Ragtime Band. Competing studios were vying for his services because of his charisma, athleticism, and adaptability. Despite being Fox's greatest star, Power was cast in a secondary role in MGM's Marie Antoinette in 1938, much to Zanuck's disappointment. Actually, Zanuck swore he would never lend Power out again. Meeting French actress Annabella on the 20th Century Fox lot was also at this time for Power. They became fast friends while co-starring in Suez. Speculation over Power's sexuality started to circulate, despite his image as a ladies' man, thanks to his associations with celebrities like Sonia Heaney, Claire Trevor, Joan Woodbury, and Evie Abbott. In his autobiography, Scotty Bowers stated that despite his preference for males, he had a number of affairs with women who were enamored with him. Nevertheless, Zanuck was not happy with Power and Annabella's developing romance and went so far as to try to break them up by implying that Annabella might find employment in Europe if she would just leave Fox's greatest star alone. After Annabella declined, Zanuck blacklisted her. "Zanuck could not stop Tyrone's love for me, or my love for Tyrone," she said. And so it came to be that they were married on July 14, 1939, despite the fact that they would subsequently endure great difficulties as a married couple. As time went on, Power's star grew. Even while some felt the picture glorified and dramatized an infamous criminal, he made a smooth transition into Technicolor and starred in the smash blockbuster Jesse James. Zanuck refused to back out of his contract commitments despite several offers from enthusiastic production companies looking to cast him in films including Joan of Arc, Golden Boy, Paris, King's Row, and Gone with the Wind, where he would play Ashley Wilkes. After some time, these pictures did well at the box office. In 1939, he was second only to Mickey Rooney, but not another performer. But the start of World War II was about to halt Power's career. The United States Army recruited Power in the latter months of 1942, Marine Corps, and turned up for their first day of training. Power remained steadfast in his devotion to serving his nation even when Fox Studio asked him to finish shooting the patriotic war picture Crash Dive, which was actually a recruiting video for the United States Army. In the late 1930s, he was eligible for the Marine Corps' expedited pilot training program since he had already logged 180 hours of solo flight. His commission as a second lieutenant came on June 2, 1943, after he had finished Officer Candidate School at Marine Corps Base Quantico and boot camp at the Marine Corps Recruit Depot in San Diego. His next stop was at the Tough Flight Training School in Corpus Christi, Texas, where he earned his wings and was promoted to first lieutenant. After the fact, in the June 2001 edition of Marine Air Transporter, former flying instructor Jerry Taylor said, "He was an excellent student who never forgot a procedure I showed him or anything I told him." His fellow Marines also took notice of the profound regard he had among them. The Corps thought he was too old to lead combat, but he did see action later, flying freight planes into war zones like Okinawa and Iwo Jima. The United States was relieved of its active duty responsibilities in January 1946, when Power returned in November 1945. After the war, Power was eager to go back into acting and quickly earned a prominent part in the film adaptation of the eponymous 1944 work by Somerset Maugham. He was in an ensemble cast that also included John Payne, Gene Tierney, and Anne Baxter. Then, in search of a fresh challenge, Power chose to shed his charming, romantic, and pretty boy personas and adopt a more sinister and multifaceted one. In Nightmare Alley, he plays the role of Stanton Carlyle, a carnival worker whose meteoric rise to popularity as a psychic and medium is tragically shattered by a series of unfortunate events. Casting Power in such a character was initially a gamble for Darryl F. Zanuck, who was worried it would bring disrepute to Power's carefully built persona. Throughout his career, Zanuck had successfully promoted Power as an asset to the company because to his charismatic personality and remarkable good looks. Zanuck finally gave up and cast his celebrity in the part, with Edmund Goulding directing. There was a lot of work put into Nightmare Alley, yet it bombed at the box office. Despite expectations, Power's performance garnered some of his most laudatory reviews to date. However, Zanuck remained unmoved and swore he would never again let Power to play a part that took away from his typically carefree persona. He went to extreme lengths, including removing the picture from circulation after its release, a move that would be reconsidered when, after years of legal fights, the film became a DVD phenomenon in 2005. For the 1947 adventure picture Captain from Castile, Power teamed up with Henry King again. His personal life started to fall apart as his profession in acting flourished. After Power returned from military service, he and Annabella tried very hard to save their marriage. However, they couldn't get over their disagreements and eventually separated in 1948. It is always difficult to pinpoint exactly when a marriage starts to break down, Annabella stated in an interview, after many suggested Power's infidelity was to blame for the couple's split. It broke our hearts, but we were both aware that we were growing apart. Neither at the time nor now do I believe it was entirely his or my responsibility. Power wed Linda Christian again in January 1949 in Rome not long after. But there were problems in their marriage as well. 3 miscarriages later, on October 2, 1951, and September 13, 1953, Linda gave birth to 2 daughters, Romina Francesca and Taryn Stephanie Power. Their marital bliss quickly faded following the arrival of their second kid. In her book, Linda admitted to having an affair with Edmund Purin, which she subsequently blamed for the couple's split. They separated in 1955. In spite of his troubled private life, Power maintained his successful acting career, delivering the comedic turns that had made him famous. But he wanted more, a part as nuanced and complicated as Nightmare Alley. Plays and films with meaningful messages are what I aspire to create. I'm sick of hearing about these heroic heroes, he said. Power and Zanuck had a violent altercation because Zanuck was adamant about keeping Power happy at Fox and was afraid to mess with the winning formula that had made him famous. After Power turned down Fox's offer of starring in The Robe as part of a 3rd contract renewal, the studio placed Richard Burton in Power's place in an effort to keep him loyal. After that, Power started to object to every new script that was sent to him. Even in Lydia Bailey, he turned down the starring part that was ultimately given to Dale Robertson. After these things happened, Zanuck became furious and took Power out of commission. After he finished his 14-film deal with Fox, the company eventually gave up and let him pursue options elsewhere. After that, Power collaborated with Universal International on The Mississippi Gambler, and they worked out a revenue split for him. He was fortunate to have $1 million in earnings from the picture. The Dark is Light Enough, a verse play written and performed by Christopher Fry in 1953, was set in 1848 Austria and featured Power. Between November 1954 and April 1955, he traveled the United States and Canada with the play. Among his stops were 2 weeks at the Colonial Theater and 12 weeks at New York's Ambassador Theater. Power also finished filming his last picture for Fox around this time, and he subsequently signed on with Columbia Pictures to feature in John Ford's The Long Gray Line. even after leaving Fox, his star power remained strong. He went on to feature in another financially successful film, The Eddie Duchesne Story, produced by Columbia. Power kept performing on stage and even went to England to play parts like Dick Dudley in Shaw's The Devil's Disciple, which ran for 19 weeks at the Winter Garden in London and 1 week at the Opera House in Manchester. Fox was hesitant to part ways with its former top star. Ultimately, he was persuaded to assume the main role in the 1957 Hemingway adaptation of The Sun Also Rises by Fox head Zanuck. Power collaborated with stars such as Rebel Rouser, Errol Flynn, and the irresistible Ava Gardner on that picture. After that, he starred as Leonard Viv, a man wanted for murder, in Billy Wilder's film version of Agatha Christie's Witness for the Prosecution. The picture was well received upon release and did well at the box office, marking Power's last feature film performance. The shady, ceaseless abuser of women was how National Post writer Robert Fulford characterized Power in an essay from 2002. Power had a triumphant theatrical return in 1958 as the lead in Arnold Moss's adaptation of Shaw's Back to Methuselah, a play written in 1921. Debbie Menardos was his bride from May 7, 1958, 3 years after he and Linda Christian had divorced. In September 1958, Power and Debbie went to Spain to shoot King Vidor's epic picture Solomon and Sheba, which also featured Gina Lollobrigida. The location was Madrid and Valdez-Partera. In a typical day, Tyrone Power would smoke 3 or 4 packs of cigarettes. He probably had hereditary heart problems by that point. Tragically, he had a heart attack while filming a dueling scene with George Sanders, a regular co-star and friend, after having filmed about 75% of his sequences for Solomon and Sheba. While being transferred to a Madrid hospital on November 15, 1958, Power, who was 44 years old at the time, died. Full angina pectoris was the official cause of death, according to the doctor. His gravestone, which resembles a marble bench, features the masks of tragedy and comedy and reads, "Good night, sweet prince." Debbie eventually moved on. She gave birth to Power's son 2 months after he died, and she married producer Arthur Lowe Jr. within a year. He was laid to rest beside a small lake.